greatest restaurant review of all time was written by Pete Wells for the New York Times in 2012. The review, titled As Not Seen on TV, was about Guy Fieri's new Times Square restaurant, Guy's American Kitchen and Bar, which Anthony Bourdain once described as a 500-seat terror dome of food. And it quickly became one of the most shared reviews in Times history. It is 1,061 words, 50 sentences, and every single sentence, except the last one, is a question. All questions. Like what? Guy Fieri, have you eaten at your new restaurant in Times Square? Have you pulled up one of the 500 seats at Guy's American Kitchen and Bar and ordered a meal? Did panic grip your soul as you stared into the whirling hypno wheel of the menu, where adjectives and nouns spin in a crazy vortex? When you saw the burger described as Guy's Pat LaFrida custom blend all-natural Creekstone Farm Black Angus Beef Patty LTOP, parentheses lettuce, tomato, onion plus pickle, SMC, parentheses super melty cheese, and a slathering of donkey sauce on garlic buttered brioche, did your mind touch the void for a minute? And when we hear the words donkey sauce, which part of the donkey are we supposed to think about? Hey, did you try that blue drink? The one that glows like nuclear waste? The watermelon margarita? Any idea why it tastes like some combination of radiator fluid and formaldehyde? Somewhere within the yawning 3-level interior of Guy's American Kitchen and Bar, is there a long refrigerated tunnel that servers have to pass through to make sure that the French fries, already limp and oil-sogged, are also served cold? Is this how you roll in Flavortown? Incredible. And the last sentence, the only sentence in the entire review that wasn't a question? Thanks. When this review dropped, the restaurant industry went nuts. It ended up being covered by CBS the morning after it released. Forbes later described it as likely the most widely read restaurant review ever. And everyone loved it and it was great, and hey, what's this? A negative review of the negative review. So does this mean this video is actually about Times reader Nani of 7 left a comment. Is it Nanny of 7? Whatever. They left a comment that really shook me. They wrote, funny, but not professional. As many have indicated, this review is written with entertainment in mind, but it is so biting that it undermines its intent. Wells slaps Fieri in the face and follows with sucker punches to the gut. How is that likely to bring improvements in the restaurant? I'm no fan of Fieri, but I'm almost tempted to go to the restaurant in spite of Wells's review. Almost. Well, Pete's review does seem harsh, but more importantly, it doesn't seem very useful. Not to us, prospective eaters, perhaps living in New York, who would probably know to avoid Times Square anyways, and certainly not to Guy, who probably wants to improve his restaurant. Guy Fieri himself actually responded to the review, but we'll get to that later. In retrospect, I find Wells's review, while a clever use of the format deserving of the attention and genuinely fun to read, was the canary in the coal mine for a much more devious modern trend. Reviews that overwhelmingly serve as entertainment first. Tell me if you've heard this story before. A 30-second sensationalized influencer review, which later turns out to be exaggerated or completely made up, craters a mom-and-pop's business overnight. Our modern restaurant critics, so to speak, are happy to trade accuracy for virality, because tell me if you've heard this one before. We are in an attention economy. Sorry for the reminder. Back to the Guy Fieri/Pete Wells story, after seeing quite a bit of criticism like this, the New York Times actually published their own official response, and it has tons of interesting insights into reviews, and here we go again. Margaret Sullivan makes the case for Wells in this New York Times article, which isn't just about the Fieri review, but the broader phenomenon of what she calls all guns blazing reviews. These super negative reviews written with an acerbic sense of humor and entertainment in mind. Sullivan stresses repeatedly that all guns blazing takedowns shouldn't happen often. She quotes Times culture editor Jonathan Landon. There are 1,000 ticks between the greatest and the worst, and a great critic is unerringly accurate in picking the right place on that scale. Her opinion of the Fieri review is, of course, that Wells's review was warranted given the horrendous quality of the restaurant. After firing off a number of examples of the best all-guns-blazing reviews of all time, she finally gets to the critical issue. Is it ever really acceptable for criticism to be so over the top, considering that there are human beings behind every venture? Sullivan says, yes, that kind of brutal honesty is sometimes necessary. If it is entertaining, all the better, but reached for only rarely. She goes on to say that if the subject of the review is genuinely that bad, one solution may be to not review it at all. But that isn't always practical. The Times can pass on reviewing, for example, an independent filmmaker's fledgling effort or an art exhibit in a small gallery, but it is committed to reviewing major concerts, films, and theater productions, whatever their quality. While she doesn't spell it out directly, we can infer the Times was committed to publishing a review of Guy's restaurant due to his influence, TV fame, and the general importance of a new 3-story grand opening in Times Square. Whether the entertainment aspect is more helpful or harmful is debatable, but they were right to review it. In my opinion, reviews that are entertaining are fine. By creating something to be consumed publicly, you are opening the thing up for criticism, even the spirited kind. However, looking back to the influencer reviews, there's a fine line between writing an entertaining review and writing entertainment that happens to review, falsifying whatever is necessary for a better story. As Sullivan points out, this kind of review should be done rarely. On the other hand, an all-guns-blazing review from a newspaper isn't necessarily reason to avoid the restaurant. If you heard the burger described earlier and thought, I'd try that, you're not crazy. The class of Americans that actually produce published writing is incredibly narrow. If you're reading a Times article from a tenured reviewer, chances are you're reading the words of someone with one or more of the following qualities. Parents that have a Wikipedia article, attended private or magnet schools in the Northeast, and then an Ivy League college. You, person not of blue blood, may very well have different tastes. The place I ate at most this year was Deli Point, best deli in Brooklyn, by the way. And unless this YouTube thing seriously takes off, I probably won't have a meal at lebron until like 2035. So that's where influencer/critic reviews are at. But there's an elephant in the phone. What about crowdsourced reviews? When you choose a place to eat, something like Google Maps or Yelp is probably the first place to check. I find there's a huge problem here too. One I'd argue is largely responsible for why our critics are becoming more sensationalized. I'll warn you that this is kind of a hot take. As John Green once pointed out in his review of The Penguins of Madagascar, people who are full of only hot takes and contrarian opinions are annoying to be around. But I think everyone should be allowed at least one hot take. This is mine. I think the 5-star scale is one of the worst things ever invented. Stay with me now. At least in the States, we've warped the meaning of stars in a way that actually makes the stuff we review worse over time. Stay with me now. Look at the screen you're given after an Uber ride. We're told explicitly to give out 5 stars to any experience ranging from decent to incredible. The app asks you what went wrong if you try to give 4 stars. Drivers actually risk suspension if they fall below a 4.6 on average. Similarly, according to this study, nearly 95% of Airbnbs have a rating of 4.5 stars or above. How does that make any sense? When you look for a restaurant on Google Maps or Yelp, you'll likely toe the range of 4.2-ish to 5 stars. 4.0 stars should intuitively be pretty decent, but it isn't. It's kind of bad, basically. So if you get 5 stars for being just acceptable and 5 stars for being utterly incredible, why try for incredible? Restaurants will see a system like this and realize it's often better to minimize bad than try to launch a daring, potentially amazing venture at the risk of alienating a few. I promise I'm not just speculating here. Real chefs interviewed by Eater in 2024 will cite the Yelp effect as cause for shelving risky ideas and less mainstream cuisines in favor of safer options, fearing the occasional low reviews that might crater the business. It's a creative flattening caused directly by the rating system for online reviews. Using the star system in this way also takes away the meaning of the star. In a study titled Overcoming the J-Shaped Distribution of Product Reviews, researchers Hu, Zhang, and Pavlou demonstrate that most product reviews follow a J-shaped curve, where it's mostly 5 stars, with some 1-star ratings sprinkled in, and hardly any ratings in between. In other words, your rating isn't really determined by how good it is for the people who liked it. It's mostly determined by the proportion of people who give you 1 star. My friend Emily reviews restaurants on this Instagram. Unlike most people, she actually uses all 5 stars, which is what I think we should all strive to do. But she also gave the Costco food court 1 star, saying it was not worth 5 big booms, just 2 normal booms. Yeah, she doesn't know anything about food. Probably never ate anything in her entire life. But at least the stars mean something.
The hot dog was good, but the chicken bake was not doing Costco any big justice.
Now here's the kicker. The ubiquity of these apps and crowdsourced reviews also means that pro reviews have had to evolve to keep pace. Critics will step in with their flamboyant prose and influencers with hot takes to re-inject culture and emotion that an average numerical star rating scale fails to convey. In an exit interview, Pete Wells himself, who recently retired from being the Times' primary restaurant reviewer, had this to say on how reviews have evolved over time. The way people read restaurant reviews has changed. If you go back to Craig Clyburn writing the 60s and 70s, his audience really was in New York. It was people who picked up or had a copy of the New York Times delivered to their door. They were New Yorkers, and he was writing for the people who lived here and wanted a place to eat. Now the reviews are being read all over the world by people who might be planning a trip to New York at some point, and a lot of them aren't planning a trip to New York ever. But they're interested in restaurants, they're interested in the city, there's something that intrigues them. So it's put pressure on the reviews to be interesting to people who have no conceivable use in practical terms for a review. They're not reading it to be told where to eat. They're reading it to learn something new about these crazy New Yorkers and their strange feeding habits, or to be entertained. I think they have shaped the way I and other people wrote restaurant criticism. There was an awareness that it wasn't enough anymore to say, well, if you live around West 74th Street, you might want to try this new diner. So Pete admits pro reviews are becoming a little crazier and more entertainment-minded, because increasingly they're not actually being used to make choices on where to eat. They're for people who are just curious about restaurant culture and or want to be entertained. He doesn't mention where people turn to instead nowadays to make decisions on where to eat, but I think it goes without saying. These days, that's done by literally counting stars. In a podcast and now book titled The Anthropocene Reviewed, John Green, in his own words, rates different facets of the human-centered planet on a 5-star scale. But I don't know why he never reviewed the 5-star scale itself. Unlike how John uses the scale, he also uses the whole thing. In the real world, there isn't a good way to differentiate between pretty good and mind-blowingly amazing. And by the way, if the entire range of acceptability is realistically confined between 4 and 5 stars, why even have 5 stars? The whole scale should just be 1 star. It's either good or bad. This doesn't solve the problem, but at least it's honest. And while we're here, attractiveness should be measured this way too. You're telling me this person is like a 6.5 out of 10? Yeah, quick question. What the hell does that mean? Too complicated. You're either a 1 or a 0. You would or you wouldn't. In a way, I think that's encouraging. You don't need to be a 10 out of 10 to find love. You just need to be somebody's 1. And while we're here, I have even more hot takes. I don't care if I am the annoying take guy. Here's the rest of them. Don't like these? You can leave me a bad review. Oh wait, you can't.
Fuck Skyrim. Drop a dislike. I will never, ever see that shit.
Anyways, in the spirit of John Green, I give the 5-star rating scale 1 star. It's an unfortunate hand we're dealt in today's world of reviews. Short of trying the restaurant yourself, it's hard to get a really accurate picture on what's good. You might be familiar with the experience of looking up your absolutely favorite restaurant on Google Maps, only to find it's rated like 4.2 stars, maybe because it's a cuisine that some people are just bound to dislike. Or getting excited to go to a 4.9 star restaurant just to get something that's pretty good, but nowhere near what the rating implies. This is the part where I'd like to suggest you can do something else, but review systems aren't something you or I control. It's not like these apps are useless, I just think they could be better. Maybe, whenever picking a good restaurant really matters, rather than relying on hot critic takes or broken star systems, you could do your own research. See what's on the menu. What people say specifically when they like or dislike it beyond the star rating. Or if you have time, you can often even read about the executive chef and their approach to cooking. Speaking of which, I promised to show you Guy Fieri's personal response to the Pete Wells review. So here it is. Following the unprecedented 0-star review of his new restaurant, Fieri released this statement via his PR team. I wholeheartedly disagree with the New York Times review of Guy's American Kitchen and Bar. My philosophy on life is what drives my attitude towards food. As a kid, I used to make 4-course sushi meals for my parents and our family friends. I got hooked on food because I saw the way people reacted. The atmosphere around a family dinner, dining out with friends and family. It was contagious. At my restaurants, we always try to live by a very simple notion. That food brings people together. I've learned that not everyone agrees with my style. The Times critic Pete Wells clearly did not enjoy his experience. I normally do not respond to reviews or critics. However, given the tone of Pete's piece, it's clear to me that he went into my restaurant with his mind already made up. That's unfortunate. We've only been open a short while, but I've seen countless people come to my restaurant. Families, fans, tourists, and yes, even New Yorkers, looking to get away for an hour or two. And they've had a great experience and a meal that they enjoyed. Like the hundreds of diners, drive-ins, and dives I've featured on my show, I've incorporated my passion and love for food into my restaurants. I'm proud of the food we put out, and always will be. Wow, I'm really starting to like this guy. Honestly, hey, this might sound crazy, but I live in New York. Maybe I should pay his restaurant a visit.